5 years in a habitat module teaches you what matters. Not the big systems, those run themselves if you build them right. It's the small failures that kill you. A gasket that degrades faster than the manual says it should. A pump bearing that decides to seize on a Tuesday instead of lasting another 6 months. A waterline that develops a fracture so fine you can't see it until you're mopping contaminated runoff out of the botany bay at 3 in the morning. I spent 5 years keeping 11 people alive in a tin can orbiting Europa, and I got good at noticing when something was wrong before it announced itself. Earth orbit felt wrong the moment we established stable trajectory. Ground control should have responded 40 seconds after our first transmission. The communication lag from Jupiter to Earth is 35 to 52 minutes, depending on orbital positions. We'd sent our approach vector 3 days ago. Someone should have been waiting. Instead, nothing. Commander Patricia Oakes tried twice more, running through the standard Hale protocols. Edwards Air Force Base, Johnson Space Center, the European Space Agency's Operations Center in Darmstadt, Germany, places that monitor orbital traffic around the clock. She used the emergency frequency bands, still nothing. Could be equipment failure, Simon Connolly said. He was our pilot, the man who'd threaded us through Jupiter's radiation belts without losing a single sensor array. We've been dark for 60 months. Maybe the receivers need recalibration. All of them? Oakes asked. Simon didn't answer that. I was already pulling up the descent checklist on my slate, a flat panel about the size of a paperback book, connected to the ship's main computer. We'd need to commit to a landing site soon. The crew transport had enough fuel for 1 atmospheric entry and a powered landing at a designated strip. No second chances. Fletcher, what's your read on life support for an extended hold? Oakes asked me. 72 hours comfortable, I said. Beyond that, we start rationing water and dealing with carbon dioxide scrubber saturation. I can stretch it to 5 days if we go to minimum crew activity and seal off the forward compartment. She nodded once. Patricia Oakes had led geological surveys in Greenland before joining the space program. She made decisions the way you hammer a piton into ice. No hesitation once you'd found solid placement. We're going down, she said. Edwards, backup site is White Sands if we encounter approach problems. The descent took 90 minutes. I spent most of it monitoring cabin pressure and thermal management, keeping the ablative heat shield from cooking us during re-entry, making sure the cooling systems could handle the thermal load without venting too much of our water reserves. The kind of work that keeps your hands busy while your brain tries to solve problems it doesn't have enough information for. We came in over California's Central Valley just after dawn local time. Through the viewport I could see agricultural land, the geometric precision of irrigation systems, the brown spine of the Coast Range to the west. Everything looked normal. No burn scars, no flooding, no obvious signs of catastrophe. The Mojave Desert spread out below us, flat, beige, interrupted by the occasional dark smudge of a town. Edwards sat at the desert's western edge, identifiable by its vast, dry lake bed, and the single, massive runway scratched across Rogers Lake's prehistoric dust. Simon brought us down manually. The automated systems could have done it, but after 5 years of trusting your life to machines, you want human hands on the controls when you return to gravity. The landing gear took our weight with 3 solid thumps. Simon cut the engines. Through the viewport, I could see the runway stretching ahead of us, 2 miles of reinforced concrete baking under the morning sun. Not another vehicle in sight. "Where's the reception crew?" Kara Weiss asked. She was our mission specialist, the person who'd spent 5 years analyzing ice cores and running spectrographic analysis on Europa's subsurface ocean. They knew we were coming. "Maybe they're waiting at the facility buildings," Dr. Alice Kendrick said. She'd been our medical officer, the woman who'd kept us healthy through muscle atrophy, radiation exposure, and the low-grade psychological grind of isolation. Could be a security protocol we're not aware of. I didn't buy that. NASA and the Air Force loved their ceremonies. After 5 years away, the longest deep space mission in history, they'd want footage, speeches, the whole display. We should have landed to find a crowd. We went through the post-landing checklist anyway. Secured the fuel systems, powered down non-essential electronics, verified hull integrity. The kind of procedures you follow because skipping them is how people die in stupid, preventable ways. Then we opened the hatch. The air that came in was dry and hot, desert morning in late spring or early summer. It tasted flat after 5 years of precisely controlled atmosphere. I took point going down the ladder, mostly because no one else seemed eager to be first. My boots hit concrete. Gravity pulled at me with patient insistence. My inner ear registered the change from Europa's fractional G, and I had to stand still for a moment while my balance recalibrated. The base looked perfect. That was what struck me immediately. Not abandoned, maintained. The runway lights were functional. The windsocks stood at their posts. In the distance, I could see the main facility complex. Low buildings painted in desert camouflage patterns, antenna arrays, the distinctive profile of a water tower. No vehicles, no people, no sound except wind moving across open space. "Something's not right," Simon said from behind me. He'd come down the ladder second, followed by the rest of the crew. 11 of us, standing on the concrete in our flight suits, looking at a military installation that should have been staffed by hundreds. Commander Oakes pulled a radio handset from the transport's external storage compartment. "Edwards, ground control. This is the Europa mission transport. We have landed safely and are requesting assistance and debriefing location. Please respond." Static, clean static, not the broken interference of damaged equipment. Just empty bandwidth. We walked toward the facility buildings. The distance was about half a mile. None of us spoke much. You learn silence in deep space, how to exist in close quarters without filling every moment with noise. The main administration building's front door was unlocked. The interior looked like people had stepped out 5 minutes ago. Computer workstations were active, screens showing monitoring software for base operations. A coffee maker in the break room held maybe 2 inches of coffee, still warm enough that steam rose when I lifted the pot. I checked the machine's clock display. 0917 local time. That matched our watches. We'd landed at 0845. Someone had brewed this coffee recently. Dr. Kendrick found the security office. The door had been left open, surveillance monitors showing feeds from across the base. Empty hangars, vacant offices, the runway behind us with our transport sitting alone on the concrete. "Check the footage archive," Oakes said. Kendrick pulled up the interface. The system was straightforward. Select camera, select time range, review. She went back to yesterday, fast-forwarding through the recordings. Personnel moving through the facility, vehicles in the parking areas, normal operations. Then she reached today's date. The timestamp showed 0530 local time, morning shift change, personnel arriving, heading to their duty stations, starting the day. The footage played forward normally until 0742. Then every person on every camera stopped moving, frozen mid-step, mid-gesture, for exactly 3 frames of video. The 4th frame showed empty hallways, vacant offices, abandoned vehicles. "Go back," I said. "Play it at normal speed." Kendrick rewound to 0740. We watched a corridor camera showing 2 technicians walking toward the frame's center, talking to each other. Their mouths moved. One gestured with a tablet in his left hand. At 0742 and 16 seconds, they stopped moving. The man with the tablet, his arm hung in mid-gesture. His colleague's mouth was still partially open. 3 frames, 1/10 of a second. Then the corridor was empty. The tablet was on the floor where the man had been standing. "Check other cameras," Simon said. His voice had gone flat. Same timestamp. Kendrick cycled through feeds. Across the entire base, the same thing. The transition took 3 frames. "Check the date," Oak said. The footage was from this morning, the same morning we'd landed, which meant something had happened, was still happening, while we were on final approach. except the coffee in the break room had been warm, fresh, like someone had made it after the disappearance, not before. I walked back to the break room and checked the coffee maker more carefully. The reservoir was half empty. The heating element was active. Next to the machine sat a ceramic mug with the Air Force logo on it. 2 inches of coffee inside, a faint wisp of steam still rising. I touched the mug's exterior. Warm. Someone had poured this within the last 10 minutes, but there was nobody here. I went back to the security office. The coffee's fresh, made after 0742. "That's not possible," Kendrick said. "I'm telling you what I found." Oakes made the decision. "We're going into town. There's a community college about 12 miles south, Antelope Valley College. Population center, public building, more places to search. We take 2 vehicles, split into teams, maintain radio contact. Nobody goes anywhere alone." We found keys for government diesel pickups in the security office. The vehicles started without trouble, fuel tanks full. Simon took the lead vehicle with Oakes, Kendrick, and 2 others. I drove the second with Kara, an astrophysicist named James Park, and our communications specialist, David Cooper. The drive south took 17 minutes. The highway was empty, completely empty. The road looked freshly maintained, lane markings crisp and bright. We passed through the town of Lancaster. Houses, strip malls, gas stations, all empty, all intact. At a major intersection, 3 cars sat at the traffic light. Doors open, engines off, keys still in the ignitions. Like the drivers had simply evaporated mid-commute. The college campus spread across maybe 50 acres of desert landscape. Low buildings, parking lots half filled with cars, landscaping that looked recently watered. We pulled into the main lot and killed the engines. Through the windshield, I could see the quad, the open space at the campus center, surrounded by academic buildings. Backpacks lay scattered on the concrete. A bicycle leaned against a rack, back wheels still spinning lazily. We split up. Oakes took her team toward the administrative complex. I led mine into the nearest academic building, a 2-story structure with a sign identifying it as the Physical Sciences Wing. The hallway inside was a still life. Backpacks dropped mid-stride, notebooks open on the floor, a phone lying face up, screen dark. We moved slowly, checking classrooms one by one. A chemistry lab on the 2nd floor was still running an experiment. The equipment sat on benches, beakers, burners, condensation apparatus. One setup had a flask connected to a distillation column, clear liquid dripping into a collection vessel at steady intervals. The heating element underneath was active. "Someone set this up recently," James said. He was looking at the notebook next to the apparatus. "The procedure here says it takes 4 hours. This is maybe 90 minutes in." Which meant someone had started it around 0730, 15 minutes before everyone disappeared. Kara found the security office on the ground floor. Like at Edwards, the surveillance system was still recording. She pulled up the footage and went back to this morning, 0742, the same timestamp. We watched students moving through hallways heading to morning classes. The quad showed maybe 50 people crossing between buildings, sitting on benches, talking in clusters. At 0742 and 16 seconds, they all stopped moving simultaneously. 3 frames, then empty campus. Kara cycled through every camera. The pattern held. Every person on campus ceased to exist in the same 1/10 of a second. "What the hell is this?" David asked. "I don't know," I said. My radio activated. Oakes. "Fletcher, we found the same thing in the admin building. Footage shows total disappearance at 0742. We're heading back to the vehicles." "Copy that. Same here." We regrouped in the parking lot 20 minutes later. Oakes called everyone together, all 11 of us forming a rough circle. "Initial assessment," she said. "Total population disappearance at 0742 local time this morning. No signs of violence, no bodies, no evidence of evacuation or panic. Infrastructure remains functional. Surveillance footage confirms simultaneous vanishing across multiple locations." "What about animals?" Kendrick asked. That stopped us. I realized I hadn't seen any. No birds, no insects, no small mammals. In the desert, you expected to see lizards, jackrabbits, coyotes. Nothing. Check for biological presence when we get back to Edwards, Oak said. Right now, we need to establish next steps. We have limited supplies on the transport. The base should have stocks, but without personnel to confirm inventory. I'm just glad Chloe wasn't here to see this, Kara said suddenly. We all looked at her. My sister, Kara said. She lives in Palmdale, just north of here. We had this huge fight 2 years before launch, barely spoke after that. I was worried about coming back, having to face her. But if everyone's gone... She trailed off, looking relieved in a way that felt wrong given the circumstances. You have a sister? Kendrick asked carefully. Chloe, 2 years older. She was an elementary school teacher. Kara, I reviewed your medical file extensively during the mission. Personal history, family background, psychological profile. You're listed as an only child. That's wrong. The file is from NASA's personnel database. It's verified against birth records. I have a sister. Kara's voice had taken on an edge. I've known her my entire life. We grew up in Portland. She taught me how to ride a bike when I was 7. We shared a room until she went to college. What college? I asked. University of Oregon. She majored in education. Kendrick pulled out her slate and accessed the personnel database via the satellite uplink. Our transport still had connection to the orbital network. She navigated to Kara's file and held it up so we could all see. Family. Father deceased, mother living in assisted care facility, Portland, Oregon. Subject is only child. That's not right, Kara said. Chloe exists. I can describe her. She's 5'6", brown hair, has a scar on her left eyebrow from falling off a swing set when she was 9. She drives a blue Honda Civic. What was the fight about? Simon asked quietly. Kara took a breath. She said I was wasting my life going to Europa, that the mission was pointless, that I should focus on finding a husband and starting a family instead of chasing rocks in space. I told her she was small-minded, that she'd never understood me. We haven't spoken since. I can prove it, Kara said. Her apartment is in Palmdale. I know the address. We can go there right now. We'll investigate, Oak said. But first we're securing the base and establishing shelter. It's almost noon. We need water, food, a defensible position while we figure out what happened. We drove back to Edwards. The return trip felt longer, quieter. Kara stared out the window, not speaking. At the base, we inventoried the commissary. Enough food for maybe 2 weeks if we rationed carefully. Water was more complicated. The base had storage tanks, but without knowing how the municipal supply system was functioning, we couldn't count on replenishment. I'd need to assess the purification systems, calculate consumption rates, the kind of work I was good at, the kind that kept your mind occupied while it tried to process impossible things. We took over the base commander's conference room for the debrief. Oakes had David set up a communications station, radio, satellite uplink, anything that might pick up another signal. Could this be some kind of evacuation? James suggested. Maybe they had warning of something, biological weapon, radiation, solar event, and relocated everyone underground or off-planet. In the middle of a weekday morning, Kendrick countered. With no panic, no traffic jams, no evidence of organized movement, and why leave the base operational? Maybe it happened too fast, David said. Like a neutron bomb, kills people but leaves infrastructure intact. Neutron bombs don't make people vanish, I said. They leave bodies. We haven't found any bodies. We haven't searched everywhere, Simon pointed out. There are 300 million people in this country. Maybe there's somewhere we haven't looked. Or maybe they're nowhere at all, Kara said quietly. Before anyone could respond, David's radio equipment activated. Not static this time. A voice, speaking Russian. Seeking assistance. Repeat, this is the European Relief Station Delta, requesting assistance with evacuation procedures. Heavy casualties. Life support compromised. If anyone receives this transmission, please respond on emergency band 7. Coordinates follow. The voice gave a string of numbers, latitude and longitude. Then the message started over. A loop. Someone had recorded it and set it to broadcast. "That's Denver," James said, looking at the coordinates. "Downtown Denver." Everyone turned to look at me. I realized I'd stood up from my chair. "You understood that?" Oakes asked. "Yes." "You speak Russian?" "I took intensive training 8 years ago. There was a joint mission planned with Roscosmos, the Russian space agency. We were going to put a combined crew on a lunar base. I spent 6 months learning technical Russian, space terminology, emergency protocols. The mission got cancelled during final planning." Oakes frowned. "I don't remember that mission." "It was in the early development phase. Political tensions killed it before it got far." "What political tensions?" Simon asked. I looked at him. "The ones between the US and Russia. The trade sanctions, the diplomatic freezes. You remember, it was all over the news." Simon exchanged looks with Kendrick. "Fletcher, there haven't been major US-Russia tensions for 15 years. Not since the joint Mars mission in 2032. Roscosmos and NASA have been close partners for decades." "That's not—" I stopped, looked around the room, saw the same expression on everyone's face. The same look they'd given Kara when she mentioned her sister. "The lunar base mission was real," I said carefully. "It was called Artemis Luna. I was assigned as one of 3 habitat engineers. We trained at Star City outside Moscow. I learned Russian because half the crew was going to be Russian cosmonauts." "Star City doesn't exist," David said. "Russia trains cosmonauts at the Yuri Gagarin Center in Korolev. It's been that way since the facility opened." My throat had gone dry. I could remember Star City. The concrete buildings, the neutral buoyancy pool where we practiced EVA procedures, the centrifuge that pulled 5Gs and made you taste blood. I could remember my instructor, a man named Smirnov, former Soyuz pilot, who taught me how to swear in Russian and correct my pronunciation until I didn't sound like an American trying to fake it. I could remember all of it, and none of them did. "We need to check that transmission," Oakes said. "David, can you trace the source?" "Already on it. Signals coming from Denver, just like the coordinates indicated. About 300 miles northeast." "That's a 6-hour drive," Simon said. "We're not going anywhere tonight," Oakes decided. "We secure the base, get some rest, and reassess in the morning. Fletcher, Kendrick, I want both of you to run medical diagnostics. Blood work, neurological scans, everything. If there's something environmental causing hallucinations or false memories, we need to know." "I'm not hallucinating," Kara said. "Neither am I added. "Then we'll confirm that with data," Oakes said. "Everybody get some rest. We're still processing 5 years in space and finding Earth empty. Our minds are under stress. Let's not make decisions until we have more information." The meeting broke up. People dispersed to find sleeping quarters, check equipment, deal with the day in their own ways. I found Kendrick in the medical bay an hour later. She was setting up diagnostic equipment, pulling supplies from storage cabinets. "You really don't remember the Artemis Lunar mission?" I asked. She looked at me with something like sympathy. "I remember Artemis, the program that established the permanent lunar base in 2035. But it was a NASA-led project with European Space Agency partnership. No Russian involvement, no facility called Star City, no cancelled joint mission. But I remember it, specifically. I can tell you the names of people I met there, procedures I learned, the smell of the training facility's cafeteria." "Kara remembers her sister the same way," Kendrick said quietly, "with complete conviction and specific detail. That's what makes this disturbing. False memories usually feel vague, uncertain. Yours and hers are concrete. So what does that mean?" "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out." She ran the blood work first, drew samples, loaded them into the analysis equipment. While the machines processed, she had me perform cognitive tests, memory recall, spatial reasoning, pattern recognition. Everything came back normal. The neurological scan took longer. She had me lie on an examination table while she positioned sensors around my skull, a portable version of the brain imaging equipment we'd used on the transport to monitor crew health. "Talk me through a specific memory from Star City," she said while the scan ran. "Something detailed." I closed my eyes and reached for it. 3rd week of training. We were doing emergency depressurization drills in the Habitat module mock-up. The scenario was a micrometeorite strike. Small hole, slow leak. I was partnered with a cosmonaut named Alexei Morozov. He was maybe 40, former military pilot, spoke decent English but preferred Russian. We had to locate the breach, apply the patch, and restore pressure within 10 minutes. We found it behind a water recycling panel. Alexei made a joke about Americans being too slow. I told him in Russian that at least we didn't build equipment that leaked. He laughed and bought me vodka after the drill. What did the vodka taste like? I smiled slightly, eyes still closed. Like rubbing alcohol mixed with regret. Terrible stuff. But you drink it anyway because turning it down is rude. "Open your eyes." I did. Kendrick was looking at the scan results on her slate, her expression difficult to read. "What did you find?" "Your memory of Star City activates the same neural patterns as verified autobiographical memories. As far as your brain is concerned, it's completely real. You're not lying or confused. You genuinely experienced those events." "But they didn't happen." "According to everyone else, no, they didn't." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it carefully. When you described your Russian instructor, Smirnov, your amygdala showed elevated activity. That's the brain region associated with emotional memory. You're not just remembering facts, you're remembering feelings, relationships. That doesn't happen with false memories or confabulation. Those are flat, abstract. What you have is real memory, somehow. That's not possible. None of this is possible. Empty Earth isn't possible. People vanishing in 1/10 of a second isn't possible. But here we are. I sat up slowly. Through the medical bay's window, I could see the Mojave Desert stretching toward the horizon, empty, silent, wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. "Do me a favor," Kendrick said. "Don't mention this to the others yet. Not until I've had a chance to run more tests. If you and Kara are experiencing some kind of shared delusion, I need to understand it before it spreads." "And if it's not delusion?" She didn't answer that. I left the medical bay and went to find someplace quiet. The base had living quarters, small rooms with bunks, personal storage, the bare minimum of comfort. I picked one at random and lay down, staring at the ceiling. I could remember Star City. Every detail. The cold Moscow winter, the taste of their cafeteria's mediocre coffee, the sound of Russian technical jargon echoing through training halls. I could remember Smirnov teaching me how to say, "The pressure seal is failing," and get to the emergency suits, in language that would save my life if everything went wrong. But according to the world everyone else remembered, none of it had ever happened. According to them, I'd learned Russian for a mission that never existed. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. Failed. My mind kept circling back to the surveillance footage. People frozen mid-step, then gone. 3 frames. 1/10 of a second. Something had happened at 0742 this morning. Something that removed every person from Earth except us. And now some of us were remembering things that didn't exist. The crew voted at dawn to investigate Denver. 7 in favor, 4 abstaining. Nobody voted against, which told me more than the count itself. We were 11 people on an empty planet with one lead, however questionable. Not following it meant accepting we had nothing. We took 3 vehicles this time. Oaks rode with Simon and David in the lead truck. I drove the second with Kendrick and James. Kara and the remaining 4 took the third. Radio contact between vehicles, standard convoy spacing. The route should have been simple. east on CA-58 to I-40 across the desert, then north on I-25 near Albuquerque and up through Colorado Springs into Denver. I'd driven parts of it before the mission during training exercises that brought us through Colorado. 6 hours total, maybe 7 depending on traffic. We made it in 4. The wrongness started 20 minutes outside Edwards. We passed through a town called Mojave. I recognized it from the sign, remembered it being maybe 10 miles from the base. But the spacing felt compressed, like someone had folded the distance shorter. Mountains that should have been visible on the eastern horizon appeared too close, their profiles sharper than they should be at that range. "Anyone else notice the terrain?" I asked over the radio. "Define notice," Simon replied. "The mountains, they're closer than they should be." Static for a moment. Then Oaks. "Mountains look normal to me. We're in high desert. Mountains are close. I've driven this route before. Those peaks shouldn't be visible for another 30 miles. "You drove this route 6 years ago," James said from the seat beside me, "before the mission. Maybe you're misremembering distances." Possible. Memory after 6 years gets unreliable, especially when you spend 5 of them in a spacecraft. But this wasn't about memory. It was about geometry, sight lines, the basic physics of how far you can see across open terrain. We continued northeast. The highway cut through desert landscape, interrupted occasionally by small towns that were all empty. At one point we passed a reservoir, large body of water reflecting the morning sun, contained by an earthen dam. The water sat on the highway's west side. I keyed the radio. "That's Lake Isabella, right?" "Lake Hughes," Kara corrected from the third vehicle. "Isabella's in the southern Sierra Nevada. This is Hughes, northwest of Palmdale. Lake Hughes is east of the 14, not west." "No, it isn't," she said. "I've been here dozens of times. It's always been on the west side." I looked at Kendrick. She was already pulling up mapping software on her slate. The satellite connection was still active. Our orbital network continued functioning, even if everything else had stopped. She studied the screen, then held it up so I could see. "According to this, Lake Hughes is on the west side of Highway 14. "That's wrong. "Fletcher, the map data is current. Satellite imagery from 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, we'd been somewhere between Mars and Earth, decelerating toward home. The satellites had photographed an empty world while we approached it. I didn't press the issue. Not yet. The highway climbed into mountain passes that should have taken hours. Instead, after 20 minutes of driving, we crested a summit and descended into flatter terrain. The transition felt abrupt, like we'd skipped sections of road that should have existed. "Are we making good time, or is it just me?" Simon asked over the radio. "I was going to ask the same thing," Oakes said. "We should still be in the high desert. This looks like Colorado plateau terrain." We passed a sign. "Colorado welcomes you. The border." We'd been driving for 90 minutes. That wasn't possible. Even at illegal speeds, the California-Colorado border was at least 4 hours from Edwards. "Pull over," Oakes ordered. "All vehicles, next exit." We took an off-ramp into a rest stop. Parking area, bathroom facilities, vending machines behind glass. I killed the engine and got out. The air was thinner here, cooler. Definitely higher elevation than we'd been an hour ago. The crew gathered in a loose cluster. Simon pulled out a paper road map, old-fashioned fold-out type, the kind you kept in vehicles before navigation satellites made them obsolete. "According to this, we're near Walsenburg," he said. "About 200 miles from Edwards as the crow flies." The map scale looked wrong. The state lines seemed squeezed together, like someone had folded the page. "We've been driving for 90 minutes at maybe 70 miles per hour. That's 105 miles maximum. We're 95 miles short of where we should be." "Could the map be wrong?" someone suggested. "Paper maps don't change," I said. "And our odometers agree. We've only driven about 100 miles. "Then the roads are compressed," Kara said quietly. "Like distances don't work right anymore." Nobody had a response to that. We continued north. The interstate stretched ahead through landscape that looked correct. Rolling plains, distant mountains, the occasional cluster of buildings identifying a town. But the spacing between landmarks felt inconsistent. Exit signs appeared in wrong orders. A town that should have been 30 miles north appeared after 10. I kept checking the odometer against the map. The numbers didn't match. We were covering more distance than we'd driven. We stopped for fuel outside Colorado Springs, a gas station sitting empty at an off-ramp, pumps still functional. I filled our tank while Oaks checked the station's interior. She came out holding a receipt from the register. Look at this. The transaction was dated today. Timestamp 14:23, about 2 hours from now. Item: diesel fuel. Amount: 52.3 gallons, the exact capacity of our vehicle's tank. Someone knew we'd be here, David said. Or the system is recording transactions that haven't happened yet, Kendrick offered. That's not how registers work, I said. They record actual purchases after payment is processed. This is dated future tense. Simon was examining the pump. No authorization needed. It just ran, like it was expecting us. I looked at the other pumps. 5 total. All appeared functional. I walked to the one farthest from our vehicle and tried to activate it. Nothing. No power, no display screen response. Only the pump we'd used worked. We got back on the highway without discussing it. What could we say? The world was conforming to our needs in ways that violated basic causality. Denver appeared after another hour of driving. The city sprawled across the eastern slope of the Front Range, downtown skyline visible from miles away, mountains rising behind it. We took an exit into the urban core and followed the transmission's coordinates to a campus marked by signs for the University of Colorado, Denver. The facility we wanted sat at the campus's eastern edge, a squat concrete building with minimal windows and extensive antenna arrays on the roof. The kind of architecture you used for sensitive research, places where you wanted to control what went in and out. The entrance required keycard access, but the lock's magnetic reader was dead. Simon forced the door with a pry bar from our equipment kit. The interior hallway was dark until we found light switches that still functioned. Emergency power, probably solar with battery backup. According to the transmission coordinates, we want basement level 2, David said, checking his slate. We found stairs and descended. The second basement level opened into a long corridor with laboratories branching off on both sides. The doors had small windows, the kind that let you check inside before entering. Most rooms appeared empty, just equipment and workstations. The third door on the left was different. Inside I could see cryo-storage units, tall, cylindrical containers with temperature displays glowing green, biological samples under controlled preservation. Oaks tried the door, locked, but the keypad next to it was still active. She tried several combinations. On the 5th attempt, 0000, the factory default that people rarely changed, it clicked open. The lab was larger than it appeared from the hallway. 3 distinct work areas, one for equipment prep, one for sample analysis, one for data processing. The cryo units stood against the far wall, 6 of them, each labeled with alphanumeric codes. Kendrick went to the nearest unit and checked its display. Active preservation. Temperature is minus 196 degrees Celsius. Sample integrity maintained. Sample of what? James asked. She accessed the unit's internal log. Biological material. Origin listed as extraterrestrial. Collection date. She paused. 3 years after we launched for Europa. That was impossible. 3 years after launch, we'd been entering Jupiter's orbit, beginning the approach to Europa. I moved to the data processing station and activated the terminal. The system came up without requiring credentials. Someone had left it unlocked, or security protocols had failed during the disappearance. Files covered the desktop organized by date. The most recent folder was dated 3 months ago. I opened it. Research notes. Dense technical language describing analysis of extraterrestrial material, though the specifics were unclear. references to substrate composition and non-native protein folding, and incompatible base pair sequencing. Someone had been studying something that didn't match Earth biology. Another file contained images. I opened it. The first image showed a cross-section of tissue, cellular structure magnified to show individual components, except the cells were wrong. The geometry didn't match any biology I recognized. Where Earth cells had round or oval nuclei, these had angular structures. The second image showed a larger sample, maybe a chunk of tissue the size of a fist, preserved in transparent gel. Its surface appeared smooth, but the internal structure was chaotic, like someone had tried to build organic material using inorganic rules. "Found something!" Kara called from across the lab. She was standing at a whiteboard covered in equations and diagrams. "Look at this." We gathered around. The board showed complex mathematics, quantum mechanics, if I was reading the notation correctly. But interspersed with the equations were phrases written in plain language. Substrate incompatibility confirmed. Observer-dependent collapse detected. Entanglement persists post-collection. Warning, do not establish direct contact. "What does that mean?" Simon asked. "I don't know," Kendrick said. "But observer-dependent collapse is a quantum mechanics concept. It refers to how particles exist in multiple states until they're observed, then collapse into a single definite state. Why would that apply to biological samples?" Nobody answered. We spent the next 20 minutes searching the lab, pulling data from terminals, examining storage. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Someone had been studying extraterrestrial material that behaved in ways that violated normal physics. Material that had been collected while we were gone. I found the security office on the basement's far end. The surveillance system was more sophisticated than the ones we'd seen at Edwards or the college. Multiple servers, extensive storage capacity, backup power systems, everything still functional. I accessed the footage archive and searched for recent recordings. The system had been recording up until yesterday, the day before we'd landed. I pulled up footage from this lab, went back 1 week and started reviewing. Researchers working. Maybe a dozen people moving through the space, conducting experiments, analyzing data. Normal lab operations. Then static, just for a single second. 30 frames of corrupted video. When the image cleared, the lab was empty. I rewound and played it again at quarter speed. Watched frame by frame. The researchers were present, working, then static, then empty lab. But in one frame, just one, buried in the middle of the static, there was an image. Our crew. All 11 of us, standing in this lab, looking directly at the camera. The angle was wrong. The camera was mounted in the corner of the ceiling, pointing down at a 45-degree angle. But in that single frame, the perspective was straight on, level, like the camera had moved to face us directly. Or like we'd existed in a different space that briefly overlapped with this one. I called the others over, showed them the frame. "That's us," James said. "From today, we're wearing the same clothes." "The timestamp says this was recorded 5 days ago," I said. Simon leaned closer to the screen. "Could be manipulated. Video editing." "Why would anyone edit us into security footage before we arrived?" He didn't have an answer. We left the lab and regrouped in the building's main floor. Oakes made the decision to camp here for the night. The building was secure, had power, and we'd need time to process what we'd found. We set up in a conference room, using furniture and supplies scavenged from offices. As darkness fell outside, someone found a break room with vending machines that still dispensed food. Stale granola bars and vacuum-sealed sandwiches, but calories were calories. I was eating mechanically, not tasting anything, when Simon approached and gestured for me to follow him. We moved into an empty office down the hall, more privacy than the conference room offered. He closed the door and spoke quietly. "I need to tell you something. About Europa." I waited. I remember the mission differently than the logs show. My jaw tightened. What do you remember? We found something. In the subsurface ocean during the deep probe surveys. Not life, a structure. Artificial, enormous. The logs say we found sterile water and ice. I know what they say, but I remember he stopped, collecting himself. We were running routine sonar mapping, standard grid pattern, 6 kilometers under the ice. Then the return started showing a geometric mass, maybe 800 meters across. Perfect angles, made from something that wasn't rock, wasn't ice. Wouldn't classify under any material analysis we ran. I wanted to dismiss it. Another false memory like Kara's sister or my Russian training. But Simon's expression stopped me. He wasn't confused or uncertain. He was describing something he'd lived through. What happened? I asked. Oakes ordered us to surface immediately. Pulled the probe, scrubbed the mission data, told us we were leaving Europa ahead of schedule. Said if anyone asked, we'd completed the survey and found nothing. That the structure was classified above our clearance. Why? I don't know. But I remember how it felt, Fletcher, looking at the sonar returns, watching this thing. The way our instruments kept failing when we got too close. How it had these angles that didn't fit. Like they suggested directions that shouldn't be possible in three-dimensional space. I pulled out my slate and accessed the mission logs via our satellite uplink. Called up the survey data from Europa. The timeline showed a complete expedition. 87 days on station, comprehensive mapping, sample collection. No early departure, no classified material. But now that I was looking closely, I noticed something else. There are gaps, I said, in the timestamps. Look here. Day 42 shows survey operations from 0800 to 1600 hours. Then day 43 picks up at 0700. We're missing 15 hours. Simon looked over my shoulder. Could be time zone adjustment. Europa's day is different from Earth's. We were using ship time for all logs, standard 24-hour cycle. There shouldn't be gaps. I scrolled through more data. Found another discontinuity, then another. Multiple periods where hours simply didn't exist in the record. Absent, like someone had edited them out so carefully that the logs still read as complete. You think I'm right, Simon said quietly. I think something happened that isn't in the official record. But if that's true, if we found something on Europa and Oakes ordered it covered up, why can I remember it when nobody else does? Why would they leave me with the memory but scrub everyone else's? Maybe they didn't scrub anything. Maybe... I stopped, trying to work through the logic. Maybe you're remembering something real that happened to a version of us that doesn't match the mission we think we flew. He stared at me. That doesn't make sense. Nothing makes sense. We landed on an empty Earth. People vanished in 1/10 of a second. Geography doesn't work right. There's a gas station receipt from the future, and we just found our own image in security footage recorded 5 days before we arrived. If one thing is impossible, why can't everything be impossible? A knock on the door interrupted us. Kendrick, looking worried. We have a problem, she said. Multiple crew members are reporting more memory discrepancies. I need everyone in the conference room. We followed her back. The crew had gathered, looking uncomfortable. Oakes stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. Fletcher, Simon, take a seat, she said. Dr. Kendrick has something to share. Kendrick moved to stand next to Oakes. She held her slate but didn't look at it. Over the past 6 hours, 4 people have approached me with memories that conflict with established facts. James remembers us stopping at a fuel depot on Enceladus during our outbound journey. David remembers receiving a message from Earth about political changes that nobody else recalls. 2 others have similar reports, specific memories with clear details that don't match any records. Could be stress-induced confabulation, someone suggested. I ran the same neurological scans I did on Fletcher and Kara. The results are identical. Their brains register these memories as genuine autobiographical experiences. No markers for false memory or psychotic break. So we're all going crazy in the same way? Simon asked. No, You're accessing real memories from events that didn't happen, at least not in the timeline we think we exist in. The room went quiet. Kendrick continued. The memories aren't random. They all relate to our mission or to Earth immediately before launch. It's like there's a parallel set of experiences trying to assert themselves. And here's what concerns me most. When I scan multiple people describing the same false memory, their neural activity synchronizes. They're not inventing separate stories. They're accessing something external. What do you mean external? Oakes asked. I mean their brains are retrieving information from outside themselves, like they're all connected to the same source, downloading memories that weren't originally theirs. I thought about the structure Simon remembered. There's something else, Kendrick said. Her voice had changed, become more hesitant. I need to tell you this before someone else experiences it. I'm going to describe a memory I have, a clear, detailed memory, and I need you to tell me if anyone else remembers the same thing. She took a breath. There were 12 of us on the Europa mission, not 11, 12. A microbiologist named David Kim. He was responsible for analyzing any organic material we might find. Korean-American, 34 years old, had a daughter back on Earth that he talked about constantly. During the mission, something went wrong. A suit breached during an ice core extraction. He died on Europa's surface. We buried him in the ice near the landing site because bringing a body back wasn't feasible with our weight restrictions. Nobody spoke. I can see his face, Kendrick continued. I can hear his voice. I remember the funeral we held, how we stood in a circle and each said something about him. I remember packing his personal effects to return to his family. But when I checked the crew manifest, there's no David Kim. We launched with 11. We returned with 11. He doesn't exist in any record. More silence. Then Kara spoke up. I remember him. Not well, but yeah. David Kim. He was quiet, kept to himself mostly. Ate lunch alone in the Habitat Module's observation deck. I remember him too, James said. He had this habit of organizing the storage lockers by color. Drove Simon crazy because it made no practical sense. One by one, 3 more crew members confirmed it. They remembered David Kim. Different details, different interactions, but the same person. Oakes pulled up the crew manifest on the conference room's display screen. 11 names. No David Kim. This is spreading, Kendrick said. Whatever is causing false memories, or real memories of false events, it's getting worse. We need to consider the possibility that our perception of reality is unstable, that the world isn't fixed in a consistent state. What do we do? Someone asked. We document everything, Oakes said. Every discrepancy, every conflicting memory. We compare notes constantly, and we accept that we might not be able to trust our own recollections of what happened or what exists. From now on, if you notice anything wrong, anything that doesn't match what others remember, you report it immediately. The meeting broke up slowly. People returned to their temporary sleeping areas, but I doubted anyone would rest easily. I found a corner of the building with windows facing east and sat watching the darkness. Somewhere out there was the world we'd expected to return to. The one with people and animals and normal causality. Instead, we had this, an empty planet where geography bent, where surveillance footage showed us before we arrived, where 6 of us could remember a crew member who'd never existed. Maybe we'd brought something back from Europa. Not in our cargo hold, in our heads. A pattern, an idea. Something that had infected our perception of reality. Or maybe the structure had sent us somewhere else, to a copy of Earth that didn't have people because it had never been real in the first place. A world that was still being built, inconsistent and incomplete, from the memories of 11 people who didn't know they were creating it. We left Denver at first light. The drive back should have taken 4 hours, maybe less with the compressed distances we'd experienced. Instead, it took 9. The roads had changed. Exits appeared in different orders. Towns we'd passed on the way up were missing. At one point, the highway split around a massive rock formation that jutted from the earth like a broken tooth. Something I would have noticed on the outbound journey. Something that shouldn't exist in the Colorado Plains. Nobody commented on it. We'd stopped trusting what we saw. 30 miles from Edwards, I made a decision. "I'm taking a detour," I said over the radio. "Where?" Oakes asked. "There's a restaurant I used to go to before the mission. Small place off Highway 14 near Palmdale. I want to check if it's still there." Silence on the radio. Then, "Why?" "Testing something." I didn't wait for permission. Took the next exit and headed west on surface roads. Kendrick and James sat quietly in their seats. Neither asked questions. The restaurant appeared exactly where I remembered it. A standalone building set back from the road, surrounded by gravel parking. The sign still read Mojave Grill in faded red letters. I'd eaten there maybe a dozen times during training, always ordering the same thing because the menu was limited, and I'm not adventurous with food. I parked and got out. The other vehicles pulled in behind me. The front door was unlocked. Inside, booths lined the windows. A counter separated the dining area from the kitchen. Vintage photographs hung on the walls. Everything looked correct, exactly as I remembered. I walked to the booth I'd always used, third from the door, window seat, sat down. The vinyl was cracked in the same places, patched with duct tape that had grayed with age. A menu lay on the table. I picked it up. 4 items. That was it. Burger, chicken sandwich, chili, garden salad. Nothing else. I'd ordered the burger every time, with Swiss cheese, no onions. It had come with fries that were always slightly undercooked. "This isn't right," Kendrick said from behind me. She'd picked up another menu from a different table. "Restaurants don't have 4-item menus." "Maybe it's a limited menu," James suggested. "Look at the walls." I turned. The photographs showed people, staff members I assumed based on their uniforms and the restaurant setting, but I couldn't make out their faces. Not because the images were blurry, but because the faces themselves were indistinct, like someone had started drawing them and given up halfway through. Kendrick walked toward the bathroom door at the rear of the dining area, opened it. White wall, just flat white surface, like the door opened onto nothing. "Fletcher, what is this place?" she asked. "Somewhere I remember." "But you're the only one who's been here before." "Yes." She closed the bathroom door and moved to a different part of the restaurant. Picked up a menu. Her expression changed. "Mine's different. 7 items, including vegetarian options." I got up and looked. She was right. Her menu listed dishes mine didn't have. Kara entered the restaurant, looked around, walked to a booth on the opposite side. Picked up a menu. "Mine has breakfast items, pancakes, omelets." The realization settled like weight in my chest. The restaurant was building itself in response to our expectations. Where I remembered 4 menu items, it showed 4. Where others expected more variety, it provided that instead. The place didn't have a fixed state. It was responsive. I went to the counter and looked into the kitchen through the pass-through window. Cooking equipment, prep surfaces, everything you'd expect. But when I tried to picture specific details, what brand of stove, what color the floor tiles were, my memory came up empty. And when I looked directly at those areas, they appeared generic, undefined, like placeholder objects. "We need to leave," Oak said from the entrance. She'd been watching without entering. We got back in the vehicles. As we pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror. The restaurant was already fading, its edges becoming indistinct, like a photograph losing resolution. When we reached Edwards 2 hours later, I went straight to the communications center where we'd set up our computer equipment. I needed to access our ship's logs, the complete engineering data from the return journey. The files were extensive. 5 years of mission data, thousands of sensor readings, maintenance logs, crew journals. I filtered for the return flight specifically, the period after we'd left Europa orbit and begun the journey back to Earth. Most of the data looked normal: engine performance, life support function, navigation corrections. Then I reached the deceleration phase, the period where we'd fired our main engines to slow down enough to enter Earth orbit. A gap. 16 hours and 42 minutes where the sensor logs showed nothing. Absolute absence, like the ship hadn't existed during that time. The gap started at the moment we should have crossed Mars's orbital path, ended as we approached Earth's orbital radius. I pulled up the crew's personal logs from the same period. Everyone had entries. Simon had recorded routine systems checks. Kendrick had documented daily medical assessments. Kara had written about her analysis of Europa samples, normal activities, normal observations. But when I compared the details, none of them matched. Simon said he'd checked the portside maneuvering thrusters at 1400 hours. Kendrick's log said she'd been running blood work on him at the same time. Kara claimed she'd been using the main computer for data analysis, but James's log said the computer had been offline for maintenance. Each person's account was internally consistent, but they contradicted each other completely, describing the same 16 hours in mutually exclusive ways. I mapped the time references against our trajectory data. The gap began as we crossed Mars's orbit, about 1.5 astronomical units from the Sun, roughly 140 to 155 million miles. Kendrick found me 3 hours later, still staring at data displays. "You found something," she said. I showed her. The gap, the contradictions, the timing. She studied the information for several minutes before speaking. "During the return flight, did you ever feel like time was wrong? Like hours were missing or added?" "No, everything felt normal." "Same for everyone else I've asked, but look at this." She pulled up her own medical logs. "I recorded daily health assessments for all crew members. Consistent routine, same time every day. Except during this gap, I have entries, but they don't align with everyone's location data. According to my logs, I examined James in the medical bay at 1000 hours. According to the ship's internal tracking, James was in the observation deck at that time. We couldn't have been in the same place. So what happened? I think we experienced that 16 hours differently, like we each existed in separate timelines that ran parallel but didn't intersect. Then they merged back together when we reached Earth. That's not possible. Neither is an empty planet. Neither is a restaurant that changes its menu based on who's looking. We're past possible. I leaned back in my chair. You think something happened at Mars orbit, something that split us? I think we passed through something that duplicated us, or created a copy of us, and that copy arrived at a copy of Earth. They'd find the same empty planet. Think about it. Everything we've encountered has been incomplete or inconsistent. The restaurant that only has details you remember. The geography that compresses based on what we expect. David Kim, who half of us remember despite no records. This world isn't missing people. It never had them. It only has what we brought with us. I wanted to argue, wanted to find the flaw in her reasoning. But I thought about the coffee at Edwards that had been fresh when it shouldn't have been. The gas station receipt from the future, the surveillance footage showing us before we'd arrived. If you're right, I said slowly, if this world is being built from our memories, then the inconsistencies make sense. We don't remember everything the same way. Where our memories conflict, reality fractures. And where we don't remember something at all, nothing exists. We sat with that for a moment. I need to test this, I said. Concretely. How? Kara's sister, the apartment in Palmdale. If your theory is correct, that place should be more detailed now than when Kara first mentioned it. She's been thinking about her sister, remembering more details. The apartment should be building itself based on those memories. Kendrick's expression darkened. And if you're right, then we know what we're dealing with. We found Kara in the mess hall, sitting alone with a tablet. She looked up as we approached. "Your sister's apartment," I said. "You mentioned knowing the address. I want to check it." "Why?" "Because I think it might prove something about what's happening here." She studied me, then nodded. "Okay, but I'm coming with you." The three of us took one vehicle. The drive to Palmdale took 40 minutes. Kara directed us through residential streets until we reached a modest apartment complex, 2-story buildings arranged around a central courtyard. We climbed the external stairs. The door to 214 was unlocked. Inside, the apartment was fully furnished, specific pieces that suggested personal history. A couch with a knitted throw draped over one arm, bookshelves filled with titles, a small kitchen with magnets on the refrigerator, grocery lists written in careful handwriting. Photographs covered the walls, family pictures, Kara and her sister as children, holiday gatherings, college graduation. The images showed consistent details, a life history captured in frozen moments. "This is exactly how I remember it," Kara said quietly. She moved through the apartment like she'd been here before, which in a sense she had, in memory. She opened a closet. Clothes hung in organized rows, sizes and styles consistent with a woman in her 30s. I checked the bathroom. Full toiletries, towels, a hamper with clothes inside. Everything you'd expect in an occupied apartment. Except no one had been here. Kara's sister didn't exist. This apartment should have been empty. But Kara had been remembering it, filling in details, and the world had responded by making those details real. "There's something else," Kara said from the bedroom. "Come look." We found her standing in the doorway, not entering. Inside, I could see a desk with papers scattered across its surface. Personal letters, bills, documents. Everything perfectly detailed. "I don't remember her bedroom," Kara said. "We never spent time in here. I only saw it once, briefly, years ago. I don't know what it looked like." The bedroom had furniture, but it was indistinct. The bed was just a bed, no specific style, no decorative choices. The walls were blank. The desk had papers, but when I looked closer, the writing on them was illegible. Just lines suggesting text without actual words. Where Kara's memory was clear, the apartment was detailed. Where she didn't remember, it was incomplete. "The bathroom," Kendrick said suddenly. "Does it have a mirror?" Kara walked over and opened the bathroom door wider. There was a sink, a toilet, a shower, and a mirror above the sink. Something stood in the shower. Behind the frosted glass of the shower door, partially obscured but clearly human-shaped. Kara went completely still. "Chloe?" she whispered. She crossed the bathroom and pulled the shower door open. A woman stood inside. She wore casual clothes, jeans, a sweater. Her eyes were open, staring forward at nothing. She didn't breathe, didn't blink, stood perfectly motionless like a mannequin. The face was detailed enough to recognize as human, but not enough to identify as a specific person. Like someone had sculpted a human form, but left the features generic. "No," Kara said. "No, that's not right. Her face. I know her face." She reached out towards the figure. The moment her fingers made contact, the form collapsed, like it had been made of smoke that suddenly dispersed. Within seconds, nothing remained. Kara stumbled backward. I caught her before she fell. "What the hell was that?" She gasped. "An approximation," Kendrick said quietly. "The world can create places, objects, even simulate human forms, but it can't create consciousness, can't create a thinking mind. All it can do is make an empty shell based on your memory of what she looked like. And when you touched it, when you expected it to be solid and real and alive, the illusion couldn't maintain itself." I helped her out of the apartment, down the stairs, back to the vehicle. She sat in the back seat, not speaking. As we drove away, I looked back at the apartment building. The windows were dark. The whole complex felt hollow, like a stage set waiting for actors who would never arrive. We returned to Edwards and called an emergency meeting. All 11 crew members in the conference room. I laid out what we'd found, the gap in the ship logs, the contradictions in personal accounts, the apartment that existed only because someone remembered it. We're not on our original Earth, I said. We're in a construct, a copy that was created during our return journey, built from our collective memories. Everything here exists because we expect it to exist. Where we don't remember something, it doesn't exist. Where our memories conflict, reality fractures. The silence lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then arguments erupted. 3 people talking at once, voices overlapping. That's insane! How could we possibly— There has to be another explanation. Oakes held up a hand. The room quieted. If Fletcher is correct, she said slowly, what do we do about it? We stop remembering, someone said. Simon. He'd been quiet until now, sitting at the far end of the table. We let it collapse, better than existing in a fake world. This world is real, Kendrick countered. We're real. Our consciousness is genuine, even if the environment isn't original. We could control it, James suggested. If the world responds to our thoughts, we could shape it deliberately, build what we want, make it better than the original. Or we could find a way back, Kara said. Then what do we do? Oakes asked. Nobody had an answer. The argument started again, different factions forming. Those who wanted to try to stabilize the world, those who wanted to let it end, those who insisted we were wrong about everything. Simon stood abruptly. His hand went to his waist and came back holding a pistol, black, polymer frame, military issue. Everyone froze. Where did you get that? Oakes asked carefully. The armory, when we first arrived. Standard procedure, secure weapons in uncertain situations. I was in the armory, David said. There were no functional weapons, just empty lockers. You're remembering wrong. The room's temperature seemed to drop. I realized what was happening. Simon had needed a weapon, had believed the armory should contain one, and the world had obliged. The pistol hadn't existed until he'd thought it into being. Some of you are making it worse, Simon said. Remembering things wrong, creating contradictions. If we can't trust each other's memories, we need fewer people remembering, fewer minds generating interference. Put the weapon down, Oakes said. Not until you understand. Every person here is a source of instability. Every conflicting memory tears reality apart a little more. We need consensus, we need control, and if someone can't maintain that control— The lights died. One moment the fluorescent panels were bright, the next we sat in complete darkness. Emergency lighting should have activated, backup systems should have engaged. Nothing happened. I stood carefully, moving by memory toward where I knew the door was. My hand found Kendrick's shoulder. She grabbed my arm. Don't move, I said to the room. Stay where you are. What happened to the power? Someone asked. I knew. We all knew, even if we didn't want to admit it. The power had failed because we'd stopped believing in it. In our fear and anger, our focus on the argument and the weapon, we'd collectively forgotten to maintain the belief that the electrical systems should function. The world was only as stable as our attention. And we'd just discovered that when we turned on each other, when we stopped thinking together, the environment collapsed around us. In the darkness, I heard Simon breathing, heard the small mechanical sound of a safety being released. Fletcher, Oakes said quietly, talk to me. What do we do? I thought about habitat systems, about the redundancies I'd designed into closed environments, about what happened when multiple systems failed simultaneously. We need to restore focus, I said. Everyone concentrate on the lights. Believe they're on. Remember what this room looked like with power. That's not how electricity works, James said. It is now. Silence. Then gradually, the faintest glow appeared overhead. The emergency lighting activated, not through automatic systems, but because we'd collectively decided it should exist. The dim red glow illuminated faces. Simon still held the pistol. but his expression had changed. He looked at the weapon like he wasn't sure how it had gotten into his hand. "We're trapped," Kara said quietly. "Not just in this world, with each other. And everything we think, everything we fear, can become real if we dwell on it." She was right. We couldn't afford conflict, couldn't afford fear, couldn't afford to let our attention slip for even a moment, or the world we barely maintained would dissolve into nothing. We were the architects of our own prison, and we'd only just discovered how fragile the walls were. I spent the next 6 hours in the communications center, alone by choice. The crew had dispersed after the lights failed, some to sleep, some to process, all trying not to think too hard about anything in case their thoughts made it real. I accessed the ship's engineering archives and pulled every file related to the Europa mission. Not summaries or reports, raw sensor data, the kind that got recorded automatically whether anyone was paying attention or not. The deep ocean sonar surveys appeared normal for the first 40 days. Standard grid mapping, return echoes showing ice thickness and subsurface water composition. Then on day 41, the pattern changed. The sonar had detected something at 6 kilometers depth, a mass that reflected sound in ways that didn't match geological formations. I enhanced the data, filtering out noise and interference. The shape that emerged made my hands stop moving on the keyboard. 800 meters across, give or take. Geometric. Perfect right angles that shouldn't exist in nature. The return echoes showed density variations suggesting internal structure, chambers or voids arranged in patterns that repeated fractally, the same shapes at different scales. The composition readings made no sense. The structure registered as partially metallic, partially organic, partially something else that our instruments couldn't classify. Temperature readings fluctuated wildly second to second, from near absolute zero to temperatures that should have melted the surrounding ice. We'd approached it. The logs showed the submersible probe descending to 4 kilometers, then 3, then 2. The closer we got, the more the instruments malfunctioned. Sensors reporting bizarre readings, navigation systems showing locations that didn't match dead reckoning, power fluctuations that had no mechanical explanation. At 1.8 kilometers from the structure, we'd stopped descending. The log entry was brief, marked with Oakes's command authorization. Abort approach, ascending to safe distance. Then nothing. The next entry picked up 16 hours later, halfway through the return journey to Earth. I searched for any record of what happened during those 16 hours, found a single encrypted file, command-level access only. I didn't have the authorization codes, but the encryption was standard military grade from 6 years ago. Security protocols that hadn't been updated since before we launched. It took me 3 hours to break it. Inside, a single text document. Oakes's personal log, never transmitted to Earth, never included in official reports. Day 41, 1847 ship time. The structure responded to our presence. When the probe reached 2 kilometers, the crew reported experiencing shared hallucinations, seeing the same geometries, hearing sounds that had no source. Dr. Kendrick confirmed all 11 members showed synchronized neural activity during the episodes. The structure was broadcasting directly into our minds. Day 41, 1923. Pulled back to safe distance. Crew symptoms ceased immediately. Simon wants to continue investigation. I've ordered immediate mission abort. Whatever that thing is, it's not worth the risk. Day 41, 2015. Departed Europa orbit. James analyzed the probe's final sensor readings before malfunction. The structure's mass doesn't match its volume. It's denser than should be physically possible, suggesting the internal space doesn't follow normal geometry. He believes it might be some kind of quantum transmission device, technology billions of years old, still functional. Day 42, 3 o'clock. Can't stop thinking about what we left behind. Should have reported it. But how do you explain something that breaks instruments just by existing? How do you tell command we found technology that broadcasts thoughts? They'd send another crew. Someone would get hurt. Better to bury it. Better to pretend Europa's ocean is empty. The log ended there. I sat back in the chair staring at the screen. We'd found a transmission device. And then, on our return journey, we'd passed through something at Mars' orbit, some effect or field the device had created. It had scanned us during our initial approach, recorded everything about us, and then when we came within range again, it had executed its function. It had sent us, not our bodies, the information that defined us, our neural patterns, our memories, everything that made us conscious. And that transmission had arrived here, at this empty Earth that existed only because we'd been copied into it. A chime from the communications panel interrupted my thoughts. Incoming transmission, radio frequency, standard emergency band. I activated the receiver. Edwards ground control. This is Europa mission transport requesting landing clearance. We have no response from any ground station. Requesting status update and emergency protocols. If anyone receives this, please respond. My own voice, speaking words I'd never said. The originals. They'd arrived at Earth orbit. I checked the timestamp on the transmission, recorded 4 hours ago, which meant they'd been here, real Earth, for 4 hours already. Probably confused, probably running through the same questions we had. They'd land soon, would find the same empty planet, would search for answers. They'd find nothing because all the evidence of what really happened existed only here, in the world we'd constructed from memory. The radio turned on again. Transport to ground control. We're committing to landing approach. Edwards Air Force Base, 0900 local time. If you're receiving this, we need assistance on arrival. 0900, 2 hours from now. I had 2 hours before the original crew, the real crew, would land on the real Earth. I went to find Oaks. She was in the commander's office, awake despite the early hour. Looked like she hadn't slept at all. I heard it, she said before I could speak. The transmission. That's us, isn't it? The ones who didn't get copied. Yes. How long until they land? 2 hours, maybe less. What happens when they arrive? I don't know. But I think we need to prepare for reality to get worse. They'll be observing their Earth, expecting things to be in certain places, remembering details that might not match what we've created here. Two sets of consciousness trying to define the same space differently. The contradictions will increase. Exponentially. She stood and moved to the window. Dawn light was breaking over the desert. When I led expeditions in Greenland, we had a protocol for when conditions became untenable. You extracted the team before the situation killed them, even if it meant abandoning the research, even if it meant admitting failure. You think we need to extract. I think we need to reduce variables. Fewer observers means fewer contradictions, more stability. You're talking about suspension. I'm talking about survival. If most of the crew enters medically induced coma, their minds stop actively generating interference. 1 or 2 people could maintain this world. Small, limited, but stable. The rest could sleep until we find a better solution. If we find one. If. She turned to face me. The medical bay has cryosuspension equipment. We brought it for emergency use during the mission. If someone got critically injured, we could freeze them. The systems are designed for extended use, years if necessary. An hour later, the crew gathered in the mess hall. Oaks presented the plan without embellishment. Suspension for most, maintenance by few, indefinite duration. People would volunteer or be selected by lottery. The vote was faster than I expected. 8 hands went up almost immediately. People who'd spent 3 days watching reality fray, who'd felt the world respond to their fears, who understood that consciousness in this place was burden more than gift. Simon volunteered first, then Kara, James, David. 4 others followed. That left 3. Oaks, Kendrick, me. I'm not going under, Oaks said. Command responsibility. I stay awake. Kendrick shook her head. You're needed for decisions, not maintenance. Fletcher should stay. He kept us alive in a closed habitat for 5 years. He can keep us alive in this one." "One person?" Oakes asked. "One person means one consistent reality. No contradictions, no interference, just disciplined thought maintaining what's necessary. And if something happens to him, if he gets injured, if he needs medical attention, then I stay too." Kendrick's voice was firm. "At least initially. I monitor the suspension systems, make sure everyone remains stable. But after a few days, once I'm confident everything's functioning correctly, I put myself under. Leave Fletcher alone." "You can't be serious," Oakes said. "She's right," I said quietly. "This world is only as large as our attention. Right now it's unstable because 11 people are thinking differently about it. One person could maintain a small bubble. These buildings, the basic systems, nothing more. It would be stable because there'd be no competing interpretations." Oakes looked at me. "You understand what you're volunteering for?" I thought about the habitat module orbiting Europa. 5 years of maintaining water pumps, air scrubbers, power systems. 5 years of checking seals and monitoring pressure and catching small failures before they became fatal ones. The work had been methodical, repetitive, unforgiving of inattention. This would be the same. Just a different kind of system to maintain. "I can do it," I said. We went to the medical bay. Kendrick prepped the suspension systems, 9 pods arranged along the wall, medical monitors, automated injection systems that would maintain sedation and, with integrated neuromuscular stimulation, prevent muscle atrophy. The same equipment we'd brought to Europa in case someone needed emergency freezing. The volunteers entered one by one. Kendrick explained the process, answered questions, helped each person into their pod. Within 20 minutes, 9 crew members lay unconscious, their vital signs steady on the monitors. The medical bay felt different immediately, quieter. The pressure of competing thoughts lifted like weight being removed. The walls looked more solid. The lighting steadied. Kendrick checked the monitors twice, then turned to me. "They're stable. Systems are automated. You'll need to verify readings every 6 hours, but it should maintain itself." "What about you?" "Give me 3 days. I'll monitor everything. Make sure there are no complications. Then I'll use the last pod. You'll be alone. I know." "Fletcher." She waited until I looked at her. "This world exists only because someone is conscious to observe it. If you lose focus, if you stop maintaining it, everything collapses. The sleepers, the building, all of it." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because you're not just keeping machines running. You're keeping reality itself stable through sheer force of will, every moment of every day for however long this lasts. That's not engineering. That's something else entirely. It's the same principle. Systems only function if someone maintains them. I've been doing that my entire career." She studied me for another moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll set up a schedule for you. Monitoring routines, system checks, maintenance intervals. Keep yourself busy. Keep your thoughts disciplined. Don't let your mind wander to things that don't need to exist." The next 3 days followed a pattern. I walked through the base every morning, checking the suspension systems, verifying that power remained stable, that water recycling continued functioning. Kendrick accompanied me, asking questions, making sure I understood every component. The world beyond the base was fading. I could see it through the windows, the desert becoming indistinct, the mountains losing definition. The hangar buildings across the runway were already starting to blur at the edges. "It's contracting," Kendrick said. "The limits of maintained observation. You're focusing on what matters, and everything else is dissolving." On the 3rd day, I picked up another transmission from orbit. The originals, still trying to establish contact. I listened to my own voice describe their search efforts, their confusion, their growing concern. They'd landed 3 days ago, had found empty facilities, silent cities, were running the same investigations we had, reaching the same conclusions. But for them, the world remained stable, fixed, real in a way ours no longer was. "They'll leave eventually," Kendrick said. She was preparing her own suspension pod, running final diagnostics. "When they can't find answers, when supplies run low, they'll return to orbit and transmit what they found. Report Earth empty, move on. And we stay here. We stay here, in our small bubble, maintained by your attention." She finished the diagnostics and climbed into the pod. "Last chance to say this is a terrible idea." "It's a terrible idea." "Good. At least you're honest." She positioned herself in the pod's interior, head resting on the support cushion. "The timer's set. 5 minutes after activation, the sedation starts. You'll have time to verify everything's working before I'm unconscious. After that, you're on your own." "Kendrick, don't thank me. Don't do the whole gracious speech thing. Just keep everyone alive, including yourself. That's all that matters." She pressed the activation button. The pod's systems engaged, monitors lighting up with baseline vitals. I watched the timer count down. At 4 minutes, she spoke again. "Fletcher, one more thing. Don't try to remember too much. Keep the world small. Just these buildings, just what you need. The bigger you try to make it, the more contradictions will appear. Discipline means limitation." At 3 minutes, her speech started slowing, the sedation beginning to take effect. At 2 minutes, her eyes closed. At 1 minute, her breathing settled into the deep, regular rhythm of suspension sleep. At 0, the pod sealed and the status display showed green across all indicators. Stable, functioning. I was alone. The silence was absolute. Not the silence of an empty building, the silence of a world where consciousness had contracted to a single point. I could feel it around me, pressing in. The boundaries of maintained reality drawing tight. I walked to the window and looked outside. The runway was still visible, still concrete, but beyond it the desert had become an indistinct grey, like fog or static. No mountains, no horizon, no sky beyond the immediate overhead dome. The world was only as large as my attention, and my attention could only sustain so much. I returned to the medical bay and checked the suspension pods. All 9 showed stable. Kendrick had been right. The systems would maintain themselves with minimal intervention. 6 hours between checks, 18 hours each day to fill with something other than monitoring. I made a schedule. Morning, equipment inspection, verify all life support systems. Afternoon, maintenance work, replacing components before they failed. Evening, medical bay check, review suspension status. Night, rest, though I didn't expect to sleep much. The routine would be everything. The discipline of hourly tasks, the focus required to maintain each system. As long as I kept my thoughts on concrete things, pipe specifications, power consumption rates, equipment maintenance intervals, the world would remain stable. I couldn't think about Earth beyond these walls. Couldn't wonder if the originals had left orbit yet. Couldn't imagine what existed outside the bubble I maintained. I could only think about what was here, what was necessary, what I could sustain through systematic attention. The habitat module all over again. Just a different kind of cage, a different kind of survival. I walked to the window. Beyond the building, the world had contracted to maybe 50 meters of visible space. Beyond that, just undifferentiated grey. Absence. The sunset I was seeing wasn't real. There was no sun. Just the memory of what sunset should look like, projected onto the sky because I expected it to be there. But it was beautiful anyway. Orange and red bleeding into purple, the colors precise because I'd watched thousands of sunsets and knew exactly how they should appear. I would watch this same sunset every evening. Would think carefully about pipe specifications and power consumption and equipment schedules because those thoughts kept the world solid. I would not think about the original Earth, about what happened to its people, about whether they might someday return. I would not think about how long I could maintain this, whether decades or centuries, until the suspension systems finally failed or my own body gave out. I would think about today's maintenance checklist, about tomorrow's filter replacement schedule, about the water pressure in Section 3 that needed attention. I was a habitat systems engineer. I maintained closed environments, kept people alive in spaces that would kill them without constant attention. This was just another habitat, another system to maintain. The sunset faded. Night fell. The stars I remembered appeared overhead. Precise constellations because I'd studied astronomy, because I knew where each point of light should be. They weren't real stars, just memories of stars. But they were mine to maintain. I returned to the control center and wrote in the maintenance log. Day 23. All systems functioning. Crew stable. World sustained. Then I began planning tomorrow's schedule, because tomorrow I would wake and check the medical bay and verify the power systems and maintain this small corner of reality through sheer disciplined thought. For as long as it took, for as long as I lasted, because someone had to, and I was the only one left awake.